Okay, well, respecting people's schedules, I'm going to begin. Recognize that people will be signing on as we go through the course of the discussion. Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jim Danhauser. I'm a volunteer with SCORE, and I wanted to cover just a couple of introductory things before I turn the discussion over to today's facilitator, my colleague, Carol Edmondson.
Good morning. Afternoon.
You see listed on this slide the organizations that provide assistance to the Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE in presenting this webinar. We're supported by the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, as well as by the Chambers of Commerce located in the towns throughout Cape Cod and the Islands, and the Community Development Partnership, which is located in Eastham. As always, we're very thankful to all of these organizations for their ongoing support of our educational efforts. For those of you who are not familiar with SCORE, we're a fully volunteer nonprofit organization and a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. We've been doing this work since our founding in 1964 through educational opportunities like this webinar, as well as by providing mentoring assistance to people who are in business or who are thinking about starting a business. We benefit from having over 50 volunteer mentors and subject matter experts in our SCORE chapter at Cape Cod and the Islands, people with a broad array of differing business experiences and expertise, all of whom stand ready to provide mentoring assistance to you. Importantly, all of that mentoring is absolutely free and completely confidential. So if you'd like to take advantage of that opportunity, you can call the SCORE office at 508-775-4884 or go online at www.score.org/Cape Cod to sign up, and we'll get you on the schedule. I also know that some of you on this webinar today come from geographic areas that are served by other chapters in our SCORE Massachusetts Rhode Island district. That's actually a district that covers the entirety of those two states. Each of those other chapters in our district similarly have mentors and subject matter experts who are available to provide mentoring assistance to you. You see the websites addresses for those chapters listed on this slide. You can simply go on the appropriate website, click the Find a Mentor tab, and you can get started. You'll also see a reference there to Coastal Community Capital. That's a Cape Cod-based lending organization that is actually licensed to do business throughout Massachusetts. We at the Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE work together with Coastal frequently, both in helping their clients to more completely flesh out their business plans, as well as helping our clients more fully understand the range of financing alternatives that may be available to them. So if you're thinking about seeking financing, we would highly recommend that you reach out to Coastal for a conversation. Last preliminary, today's procedures. All participants, other than myself and our facilitator, have been muted. We ask that you enter any questions that you have in the Q&A feature, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. Use the chat only if you want to have a specific conversation. It's simply easier for us to follow the questions that come in by looking at one feature as opposed to having to toggle back and forth. We will answer questions during the course of the discussion as well as afterwards, and we will answer as many of them as we possibly can. Be aware that the webinar is being recorded. A link to that recording will be sent out to everyone who registered for the session. And finally, we will launch a poll just at the end of the session. I would ask that you fill that out before you leave. It simply helps us to make sure that our educational programming is meeting the needs of our target small business community. So with that, Carol, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Jim. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Some of you I know well, and some of you I'm meeting for the first time, which is always exciting. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today's traveler. Just give me a moment here. I'm going to share my screen with you and we will be on our way. Okay. So the object of the game is to understand a little bit about who today's traveler is, and then how do you reach them to help grow your business. And we'll cover a lot of territory. As I mentioned, happy to answer questions as we go, and at the end as well. All right, so. Thank you. Jim, if you can,
You should see a button at the bottom of your screen. There are arrows.
and not, so could it be at the top? I have nothing at the bottom. Sorry about that, folks. Give me a minute.
Also, Carol, I know that your volume is a little bit low. If you could,
Oh.
maybe when you speak a little bit louder, that'd be great.
I certainly can. Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay, so my apologies, folks. I'm using a slightly different Zoom platform for today, and I'm just trying to locate the ability to change slides. So give me a moment and I'll ask them for a little help. I don't have anything on the bottom of the screen, Jim, sorry. What should I be looking for?
Well, you should be, I don't know what computer you're using.
I'm on
You can,
I'm on a desktop, on a PC.
okay. You should
Normally,
be
I
able-
would just be using my page down and page up, but that's not, doesn't appear to be doing it, so.
Well, I think the default would be for me to share the screen, run through, and I can control the slides.
Okay. And actually, that may be the issue, because as I look at slide control, you are controlling it right now according to this. But either way is fine. I'm happy to have you do it.
Okay, well, why don't you do that? Stop your share.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, folks. Here you go.
Thank you. Okay. My apologies. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. We're going to cover several different areas of who's actually traveling today. Some of this may be well understood for those of you who are paying attention to industry studies that have been done over the last several years. But we're going to start by talking about leisure travelers, and depending on your business and your location, you may be serving leisure travelers, you may be serving business travelers, you may be serving both, and we're going to talk about them all. So basically, in our market, in our location being coastal Northeast, we have leisure travelers coming from all over the globe. And travelers today, you've heard this over and over again, are all about the experience. So a couple of groups that are really important for independent properties. The largest group of travelers today is between the ages of 25 and 60, and that group covers a number of generations that you've heard about, Gen X, Gen Y, etc. But for travelers, we look at them in a couple of groups. The 25 to 45 group are an interesting demographic in the sense that they often have delayed marriage, children, homeownership, and are very focused on having experiences before they quote unquote settle down. A little bit different than the baby boomer generation that drove travel for a long time, in my experience, because they tended to do all of that up front and travel later. So this is quite a significant change, and it's made a big difference in how we do what we do. There's also the group of 46 to 60-year-olds, and these folks tend to be empty nesters. So again, they have time to travel, they have the interest in traveling, they've raised their families, and are now looking to join that group of experience-based travelers. So it's all about experiences, not possessions. Big change. These folks all share their experiences widely with their quote-unquote friends on social media. So the object of the game here for these travelers is often to be the first to share photos on Instagram of a particular event, location, experience. That socially is very important to them. These folks are tech-driven as they travel. And what that means is from the moment they think about taking a trip, from the moment that they begin dreaming about the next getaway, it's all about technology. So they are on their computer, on their mobile device, more and more mobile, where they are looking at the locations, they're looking at the hotels, they're looking at the experiences, and making decisions using technology. There is a growing return for certain aspects of the market to working with travel professionals, but I will tell you that this age group are used to doing it themselves. They're incredibly independent, and you'll often find that they don't want to talk to anyone, including you, about their trips. They want to find everything they need online. They also have discretionary time and money, and that makes them bright as repeat guests. And that is critical to you because in your marketing, that's what you want to develop, a relationship with them that causes that repeat business. Okay, so who else is traveling? Another important group are those that may be truly at leisure. So these are the 60 to 75-year-olds based on the industry studies. They may be retired or semi-retired. They're also experience-based travelers, but they're at the other end of that spectrum. They have done their career or are winding down their career or who have downsized their career in order to make time for experiences. They also use technology to navigate travel. They may or may not be as tech savvy, but as mobile apps become more and more common, you should expect that these folks are going to also be reaching you through technology. And it's really important to understand that these folks, with the discretionary time that they have to travel, should become your guests. And what I mean by that is you should expect these folks to repeat 3 and 4 times a year. If you're doing it right, you should be creating an environment where you have a core of guests who have the time and the money and who will come back at different seasons for different reasons and be your guests. When I say your guests, to the point where they may well be contacting you or looking at your calendar to find out when you have availability in order to plan their next trip, as opposed to the other way around. This is a really important core group for us. And then we have business travelers. And this is a very interesting group of people, obviously tech-driven. They're traveling to your area because they serve local businesses, institutions, organizations. They may be consultants, they may be salespeople, they may be professors. There's all sorts of reasons for these people to travel. And they often are longer stays, but their needs are quite different than a leisure traveler. The timing of their coming and going, the need for information about the area may be quite different. And they often return, not just as business travelers, but as leisure guests. If you also accommodate leisure guests and you're focused primarily on business travel, these folks should be repeats and for more than one reason. And in today's environment, with so many people working independently from home or in a non-office environment, many smart independent properties are catering to these folks to do a work and play combination and create a true long stay, much longer than we would normally expect.
Carol, people are still having a little trouble hearing you. So if you could
I'm
either
sorry.
get closer to your computer,
I certainly can.
that would be helpful, I think.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Thanks.
Okay. And we can move on. Okay, so why do these folks travel? Travel to most travelers today is largely an adventure. Oftentimes it is combined with an interest in the local arts, history, culture, food, events, whether they be weddings or festivals or concerts, and of course for business. Reaching these folks from a marketing standpoint is all about wrapping yourself and your property and your offering around these reasons to travel. And we're going to talk about how you do that a little bit later. Another key factor that brings your guests, obviously, is your property. And this is where you've spent your time and money, and you've created something completely unique. Being independent, the key is it's not about looking like everyone else. It's about being uniquely you. You're not trying to fill 1,000 rooms. What you're trying to do is to attract a loyal clientele who will share the information about what you have to offer with everyone that they know. Excuse me. So your property might be historic, it might be something really quirky, something that offers comfort, something really cutting edge, something elegant and next level. It really doesn't matter what your brand is, as long as you understand it, you understand who the guests might be, and then you find a way to go after them. But by articulating your brand, one of the things that you do is allow your guests to be your ambassadors. If it's easy for them to explain who you are and what you are, they will organically share that information and increase your revenue and occupancy without any further cost to you. So that can actually lower your overall marketing costs over time if you're good at articulating your brand. Another key factor, and one that I think is on everyone's mind in the hospitality business right now, staff is at a premium. We're all struggling to find good people, but I will tell you, for as long as I've been in the business, it's important to understand if you are not treating your staff at least as well as your guests, you don't really understand the power that they have to grow your business and make you more successful. So it's incredibly important. Obviously, we all think about pay and benefits, but I will tell you that's not the whole story. I think that in the hospitality business, two things that staff often do not find and should be finding with you is flexibility and respect. And when I say that, we often think of staff as a bit of a commodity. You know, if you have front desk staff or housekeeping staff, it's your expectation that if it's your high season, they're working weekends no matter what. But sometimes things happen and you need to be flexible in order to show your staff that you do respect the work that they do. However you treat them, that is how they are going to treat your guests. So however your staff feel about their job, your property, you as an employer, that will be reflected in the service that they provide. And of course, the other piece of this, which is just baseline, is your staff needs to be trained. They deserve to have the information about how your business operates and what your brand is all about and what's important to you as the owner of the business. And if you haven't shared that with them in some formal way, you're probably limiting their ability to serve your guests. So this is a critical issue, and even more so where staff are so hard to find. Okay, so small and local are in fact your superpower. We often in the past have felt as though we were competing upward against big box hotels. And I will tell you that that has essentially flipped around in the last 3 or 4 years. Major hospitality brands, you name the big box brands, have spent a fortune over the last few years developing small brands. And what's so fascinating to me is that oftentimes those small brands never show the name of the big box owner. So the Hilton, the Marriott, you name the big box, have all gone out and spent a fortune creating properties to compete with you. And the reason is because you are what travelers want. So you have a complete advantage as an independent property. And it's interesting that if you do, then you also have the opportunity to market that in a way that it can be seen. So that, and you know that means having a website. It's all about search engine optimization. It's all about capturing email and using email, which, by the way, in our business is about the most powerful way to communicate right now with guests. It's about blogging, and those of you who are cringing, I will tell you that it's a powerful tool. And then it's also about social media. What's interesting is a lot of people get very focused on social media, but you should understand that social media is a great way to stay in touch, doesn't necessarily drive booking. So SEO, email, blogging, really important. And you have to tell your story, and that's not free. That costs money. Most successful independent properties are spending about 8 to 10% of their revenue on marketing. So you may want to go back and look at your numbers and see what you're doing and how you're doing. And here's a really key point, and it's one I run into all the time when I am working with independent properties. You and your brand are the fuel. So think of this as a rocket. So you're the fuel that propels that rocket. But you probably are not the pilot of the rocket, and you probably don't own the rocket. What I find is that oftentimes independent property owners feel they have to do it all. Unless you are in fact a technology-based marketing expert and you have the hours in the day to give to that effort on top of everything else you do, it's absolutely critical that you hire this expertise. It is not something that you hand off to your high school student who is a social media wizard. It's not something you hand off to your next door neighbor who once built their website. This is too critically important to your success. What you focus on is creating the brand and creating the story. Most successful independent property people then hand that off to someone who in fact owns the rocket and knows how to pilot it into a space where there is so much information that it's extremely hard for prospective guests to sort through it all. So you have to be an expert at this to do it well. And I think it's one of the most important decisions you're going to make if you want to be competitive.
So Carol, you're advocating that people hire agencies to do this. They look for individuals for their staff. What's the best way for people to accomplish this?
You have multiple choices. There are national firms, interestingly enough, who do nothing but market for independent small properties. They don't work for big box hotels. They are focused on us. And they are well known, happy to share information about them. There are probably 4 or 5 of them. And you also have some very smart local marketing companies who have that same expertise. It's not critical for your marketing person to be local in order for them to be successful for you. But if you're more comfortable with that, we certainly have that expertise within the local area. But these are people who do nothing else all day long. When you talk to these folks, they will tell you that their job is to pay attention to what Google is doing for 10 hours a day. That's what they do. And that drives everything.
And what role do you think texting would play? Should people be capturing phone numbers?
Primarily what you're capturing is email addresses in terms of, you will capture all of the information. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the concierge software that is totally text driven. And you will communicate largely with your guests using text once they have booked with you. So I would say both email and phone are important. And these pieces of software that we're going to talk about also are going to make that really easy for you to do. And they're also quite inexpensive.
Someone asked, will you be able to provide a list of those resources, the
Yes.
4 or 5 national firms that you mentioned?
Happy to do that. Leave some information in the chat, and I will be happy to do that. No problem.
Okay. So the other alternative, Carol, would be you could provide that information to me, and when I send out the recording link, I can include that in the email.
Good idea. Great. Let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're small and local and that's your superpower, how do you have a big impact? Small and local feels as though it has some limitations, but I will tell you that within your own geography, you have a great opportunity driven inward from you through your community to do a better marketing job. So the secret here is to identify the others who serve your guests in your community, and then find out what's in it for them. What is it that they need or want, or what are the issues they're having in reaching your guests? Funny story, when I was a new innkeeper, I didn't know anyone in my location. We purchased our inn and moved to our location for the very first time. And so I was out talking with people, and I had made up these rap cards, which, by the way, are still a useful tool in many areas. And so I was out knocking on doors, and I happened to stop at the local gas station, and the gentleman who owned the gas station, only gas station in town, gentleman who owned the gas station in his greasy overalls, because he did quite a bit of repair work. And I approached him and said, I've introduced myself and said, I'm wondering if people often stop and ask you when they stop for gas about where they should stay, where they should eat, etc. And he said, he laughed and he said to me, he said, do I look like I stay at inns? He said, but I get that question 15 or 20 times a day. And he said, people drive me crazy. I don't know why they think I would know the answer to that question. Well, of course, I was right there with help. So what I said to him was, I'd love to leave these rap cards for you. I also had a clear plastic holder for them because I knew if I handed them to him, they'd probably end up in a drawer somewhere. So I set it up in his window, and I said, rather than trying to assist these people, and I'm not sure he necessarily was, I'm sure he was suing them off. I said, just hand them a rap card, and we'll take it from there. And about 2 weeks later, this is midsummer, full house. I'm in the middle of making breakfast for 28 people. The phone rings, and it's my gas station friend. And he says to me, and I quote, "Carol, you're killing me. I need more rap cards, and I need them now." and who would have thought that he would have been a partner? But he turned out to be one of 2 very unusual and very measurable sources of business for us. So think broadly. Don't think of the obvious, restaurants and adventure tour and all of that. Think broadly about who else in your area serves your guests for all kinds of reasons. And then find out what they need, and then invite them to partner in a win-win scenario. Very often in this situation, what hoteliers tend to do is to approach someone who they know their guests are using. Let's just use a restaurant as the obvious example. And we often will approach a restaurateur and say, would you be willing to offer a discount, take special reservations, whatever it is that you think would be helpful to your guests. They get asked that question hundreds of times during a given season. Much better off to meet them, listen, and by the way, listening is your other superpower, listen to what's in it for them, and then find a way to partner with them so that they're getting something from the relationship. You'll also find that there's a lot of new concierge software. I use two examples here, TouchStay and Frictionless are two. You go online, there's great information about them. These are mobile-based applications. And what happens is, even before your guests arrive, once a guest has booked, that you can give them a link to this software and you spend some time, it'll take you a week or so of work to get it put together, working with the folks from these software companies. They're very helpful. And by the way, this is really inexpensive, surprisingly inexpensive. And so you send a link, when you send a confirmation, you send a link to your guest to this software, which has the information about all of the people and things that are happening in your area, and it links to maps and directions and ideas. And because you've developed these relationships, you can include all of these people in your area and grow it over time, so that your guests feel as though they're surrounded by great information. I think that is a very powerful tool because it's like having a concierge, but it's one that fits the picture for today's traveler. Because one of the key features of today's traveler is they don't want to talk to you. They want to find the information online. They're much less likely to approach you than travelers in the past. They want to book online. They want to find things to do online. And if you can satisfy that with a simple and inexpensive piece of software, they feel as though you have done them a great service. And ultimately, the beauty of this strategy is that besides growing your business, it also increases the appeal of your marketplace in general, which again comes around to you. But it also strengthens your community's commitment to hospitality, and that's not always simple. As you know, as an independent business owner, not always easy to get your community involved and to make them feel happy about the fact that you're bringing thousands of people to the neighborhood. But this kind of software, which benefits everyone, really helps to grow that community commitment. Okay, so a little bit about adaptability. So when things they cannot control change what guests need or want, successful businesses adapt. That's a really important point. Don't fall in love with your business model. It's going to change. And if you're going to continue to be successful, you need to change with it. You need to be listening. Again, one of your superpowers. You need to be listening to your guests and understanding what they want and need. These are just some fun examples that are outside of our industry altogether, but I think very representative of what I'm talking about in terms of how industries change over time. So the auto industry started out, it was all about speed, from horse and buggy to something that was machine driven. And for many, many years, the American auto industry was hugely successful, increasing speed and making cars bigger and more exciting. And that was the name of their game. And they were making money hand over fist. And then, outside of their control, car companies from around the world began making cars that weren't based just on speed and size, that it was all about economy. And the American auto industry was forced, they were not happy, it was very expensive, I'm sure their bottom line suffered, but they were forced to go to an economy model in order to compete because, frankly, better automobiles were being made and purchased here by people from other countries. From there, the driving public began to drive the desire for more luxury. So we got economy, and then they said, okay, it gets great gas mileage and it's safe, but I really want some luxury. and the auto industry began to move more towards an economic luxury vehicle. And of course, reliability was all built in there because our foreign competition had figured out how to do that. And then another change happened just when we thought we had it figured out. The American public said, you know what? We like the idea of luxury, but we'd like it in a big utility vehicle. And we'd like that vehicle to be both the family car and also the utilitarian use. So that industry, absolutely core to our economy, has changed dramatically through influences inside, outside, and oftentimes through no choice of their own. Another fun one, Kellogg's was one of the early cereal companies. They started out as health food, and as I understand it, it was not very appetizing. It was pretty much tasteless rabbit food, but it was meant to be healthy, and it was marketed almost as medicine. The American public said, thanks, but we're not really crazy about that, and demanded something more palatable. And what we ended up with was these very sugary, not healthy at all, cereals that were incredibly popular for a long period of time until the American public became very conscious of its health, and voila, we were back to whole grain. However, we had learned to modify that whole grain to make it palatable so that people would continue to buy the product. And I'll just mention one more because I think it's a fun one. Coca-Cola. This is an example of a company who did not listen to their customers. What they did was they looked at their bottom line and started to get nervous because Pepsi was eating their lunch in certain markets. And so they independently decided to come out with something called New Coke, which was a new flavor, a change in the flavors of Coke, which failed monumentally because they neglected to ask their customers whether they wanted a new flavor of Coke. So they actually had to retract that. I'm sure it was a costly mistake, and go back to their old formula. And by the way, when they went back to their old formula, they actually regained their market share. So this is not unique to hospitality. Every industry goes through this. One of my favorites, social media. We all remember when social media was an open and free platform, and they enticed everyone to sign up because it was open and free and you could use it anytime, anywhere. And they quickly figured out that if they were going to survive, they had to be profitable. And so today we live with the many and varied subscription models for social media and for all entertainment for that matter. So the whole concept of open and free went away when the rubber met the road and they realized that they had to make a living. So being adaptable is just a part of the deal. If you're going to be a business owner, you will change. And the way you change is to listen to your guests.
And Carol, how do you suggest that people get that information from their guests?
It's a good question. As an independent property, I would say that, and I think I've tried everything, and my clients as well. I think the thing that really works, because remember that your superpower is that you are small. What really works is to engage your guests in conversation, and there are some tricks here. You have to do this one-on-one. You can't do this in a group because guests are very nervous about or uncomfortable about sharing the information. And you also have to be a little bit persistent. The way I did it when guests were checking out, and you're not necessarily going to talk to everyone, but as guests are checking out, and they often will make a point, if you're available, to thank you and to tell you what a lovely time they had, etc. I always found that that was my opportunity to say, if there was one thing that we could do to make it even better, what would it be? And your first reaction to this is often, oh no, it's perfect the way it is, because they love you and they want to tell you how happy they were. So you have to persist and say, I'm thrilled that you enjoyed your stay and we love having you. But if there was just one thing, and you'd be amazed at the things that you will learn. So it's about listening. It's about finding an opportunity to get a guest one-on-one, because if they are going to give you a criticism, they won't do it in front of other people. But I find that that communication works much better than any of the techniques that larger properties use, doing written surveys, etc. Not as successful. But also, you will learn a lot from reviews, and how to manage that whole process, how you respond to reviews, how you react one-on-one with a guest who raises an issue in a review, is a topic all unto itself. But paying attention to reviews and reaching out and really learning what happened is another great way to do that in our business.
On reviews, if you see a bad review on Yelp, what do you recommend that an owner do?
Great question. So the first thing, if you get a bad review, first of all, understand that everyone does at some point. Even if you're amazing, you're going to get some guests for whom it just doesn't resonate. And I will tell you that surveys show that people who have only good reviews are quite suspect online. Guests want to see some variation, because otherwise they begin to disbelieve. So don't panic if you get a bad review. It's incredibly important to respond to a bad review. And what you have to understand is that who you are writing to is not the person who wrote the review. When you write a response to a bad review, you're writing for your future guests. So the first thing you have to do is, and you may have to step away and take a breath before you do anything. But when you write your response, you need to own that responsibility as the owner. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not. You need to accept that this is the experience that your guest had. And then you need to find a way to communicate your willingness, desire, to correct anything that actually was wrong. You never want to accuse the guest, even if you know that this guest did not have the experience they're representing. You never accuse them or confront them online. You can do that. There's lots of other ways to do that. But the secret is to think of your response as being written to future guests, not the person who wrote it, and to represent that you are listening and that you are willing to improve where something legitimately needs to be improved. It's an art. Okay, so I attended this session. There were somewhere between 700 and 800 people in the room when I heard this quote, and you could hear a pin drop. You may or may not have ever heard of Horst Schulze, but he was at the time the CEO of Ritz-Carlton. So he was at the top of the top of the top. And what he said to us was, every hotelier wants to be you because you can deliver what we can only promise. Now, this was to a group of small bed and breakfast inn owners at our national conference. And we were dumbstruck because, of course, we thought of Ritz as being the ultimate. But he was completely sincere, and he backed it up. He actually left Ritz not long after that and opened a small boutique hotel group in Europe. And he did it expressly, and he made it clear. He said so in public. He did it so that he could deliver the experience that his guests want, that the Ritz couldn't at any price. Doesn't matter how much people are paying. And I thought this was extremely telling, and it really speaks to the superpower that you have as a small property. So the good news is you have the power because you have exactly what today's traveler wants. The bad news is you don't have many excuses not to succeed with today's traveler because you are exactly what today's traveler wants. So, so good news and bad news, but hopefully mostly good, especially because there are so many ways for you as an independent property to choose your brand, be adaptable, listen to your guests, work in your community. It's all right there in front of you in a way that it isn't for people like the Ritz-Carlton.
Okay, folks, we had a lot of questions as we were going through. I know that there were some audio issues. I hope that we have managed to work through those. If anybody has any further questions, fire away. You'll see here, Carol is a mentor with SCORE, in addition to her long background in the independent hospitality business. If you do have questions for her, you can feel free to email there at that address that is shown at the bottom of that slide. I will also, when I send out the link to the recording of today's session, I will include the reference to the national and local resources that Carol is going to identify for me, particularly the ones that address themselves to social media and search engine optimization and blogging and the ins and outs of that sort of marketing of your properties and your property experiences.
Yeah. Those folks that we're going to be hearing, they will do a sort of cradle to grave plan with you, where your piece is that story, the brand, and where they then take it into the world of technology and how to place yourself where you want to be placed. As I said, they think of themselves as spending their day just watching Google and understanding what's going to change tomorrow. Because that's another whole area that you don't control and that often changes, not always to your benefit.
And search engine optimization is a very complicated topic that you could spend a lot of time trying to get expert on yourself, and probably not succeed. That said, there are mentors at most SCORE chapters who can help you with that, or subject matter experts. At the Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE, we have a subject matter expert whose business is SEO. And in fact, he's going to be leading a webinar for us in May. So if you have an interest in that topic, you should feel free to have a listen to that session as well. Carol, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. So thanks very much for your participation today, everybody, and particularly to you, Carol. And as I said, I will be sending out a link to the recording just as soon as it's available, which will probably be by the end of the day today or tomorrow. Hang on a second. I am seeing one more question. No, all done. Okay, everybody, thank you for your participation. And again, Carol, thanks very much.
Thank you.